cool. So, Rob, for those of people who don't know you, which is probably not too many, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your sort of story to date?
Brad, you know they say flattery will get you nowhere, hey?
Oh, I've worked with my wife,
So
so I don't know about that.
fair enough. So my background is that I guess I've always been an entrepreneur in some form or fashion. I had an entrepreneurial spirit, but was drawn to music. And music, whilst a few people succeed wildly, I would be one of those people who didn't, shall we say? But what I was drawn to was a corporate team building company that was using African djembe drums to do team building activities. And I joined this company called Drum Cafe in Cape Town, South Africa. Worked with them for a couple of years, and then had the opportunity to work with the founder in launching Drum Cafe in London,
Hmm.
which was just the most unbelievable experience to kind of get a from the ground up experience of building a business, building a brand, um, uh, getting marketing down, getting operations down, delivery, and really doing that all from the ground up. So I
Hmm.
learned a huge amount from this entrepreneur, Brett Slesinger, who I
Hmm.
worked with for a few years.
Hmm.
Um, and then for many reasons, which included the fact that I actually had to stop playing reasons because of a ringing in my ears, I
Sure.
ended up realizing that in fact one of the things that I was enjoying most about the work that I was doing was teaching music.
Hmm.
So I got drawn to teaching generally, did some postgraduate studies in teaching, and then found myself in a position where between my brother, myself, and my mom and dad, we started a business called Get Smarter,
Yeah.
which is an online education company that in 2007 was working only with the University of Cape Town
Hmm.
to deliver short courses to working professionals. Um, and we grew that business over the next 10 years to the point where we were operating with students from 145 countries around the world. We were achieving a average graduation rate of 90%,
Hmm.
i.e., 90% of the students who started their program successfully graduated.
Amazing.
We were working with universities the likes of Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, Stanford, and many more top Ivy League universities. And by the time I finished up my tenure, we'd educated just over 90,000 students.
Amazing.
So it was an incredible journey, also very tiring. And we had the opportunity to sell the business in 2017 to NASDAQ listed 2U.
Hmm.
And I continued to work within the business for another year, which was great fun. And found myself at that point knowing that there was another chapter ahead, and so I finished up my time and have taken a bit of time off, and am now looking quite confidently towards the next thing.
Oh, I'm sure we can chat about that in a bit, I'm sure. And that's going to be really exciting to see what you're on to next, especially given the success of Get Smarter, sorry. So during that journey, if I can just touch on that journey for a bit and give a bit of context to our conversation, Rob, is there's a sort of trend that we're seeing in the media, and there's a lot of hype in the media around CMOs becoming extinct. That's a kind of headline or
Yes.
clickbait that's going around at the moment. So you've got guys with really big companies, Johnson and Johnson, Uber, Taco Bell, Hyatt Hotels, all losing the CMO role. McDonald's recently announced on Monday that they're also not going to be replacing their global CMO. Sorry, and I just wanted to, from my perspective at least, it's not so much that CMOs that the role of a CMO is no longer needed. It's that the role has just changed so much, and the role of marketing has just changed so much. And having gone through this super hyper growth journey in Get Smarter, it would be really interesting to see how you structured your marketing departments. Did you have a CMO? Didn't you? And what was the role of marketing in that organization?
Great, yeah, wonderful, and I think that's very very well put. Brad, so I guess probably the perspective that I could give you is quite I guess it's a perspective quite individual to me based on my experience of actually of kind of putting together a startup, high growth, very, very marketing and sales orientated business. And because we didn't take on any outside venture capital, our cash flow was the lifeblood of our business. So
Hmm.
if we didn't get our marketing and sales right, the business was going to die very quickly.
Hmm.
So I guess my perspective is framed in that context. But really, I've I remember when we started the business, speaking to friends who were in advertising agencies that were working together with these massive kind of Johnson and Johnson type companies, who would speak to the fact that their chief marketing officer was actually a separate function from sales and others.
Sure.
And I could never quite wrap my head around it. I guess as a business that was born digital, for us, the idea that you could ever decompartmentalize the general awareness, and let's call it brand awareness or lead generation, from the actual ability to sell and convert that into sales, and therefore revenue, was just something that didn't really make sense to me. And again, kind of in the startup grind, cash flow being so important, I just didn't have the opportunity to think at the sort of scale where you're able to just create general brand awareness and kind of creative campaigns around your business. Our marketing was always very specifically focused around individual courses and driving leads towards sales. So yeah, I guess that the context of my opinion is relatively important, because I haven't worked in an enormous multinational. But what I can say is that the vast majority of startups, I think, could relate to this, especially in where we are now, 2019. Digital marketing has fundamentally changed the game. The fact that we can get the degree of analytics and insight into the efficacy of various marketing channels means that I'm sure you'll remember the old adage, kind of 50% of our marketing is working, we just don't know which 50%. And that's certainly not the case anymore, at least as it relates to lead generation. Making sure that your marketing spend is incredibly targeted, and that you're tracking that spend all the way through to the completed sale. Is just absolutely critical for particularly for small businesses and startups, and more especially in the digital domain. So Brad, I don't know that if I had to reflect on our CMO function at Get Smarter, under the CMO function always included functions like sales. It included head of digital. It would include a content marketing team, a PR team underneath them, but the entire marketing ecosystem was always very, very squarely pegged around the CMO function.
Okay, great. I mean, that's great context, Rob. Thanks. And I think just having listened to you, obviously, I think you've brought up a lot of trends and realizations that are going on in the world. So obviously, the number of platforms that have and digital channels that have come about in the last sort of 10 years have obviously meant that we can A, get more measurable, but B, they've actually allowed smaller businesses to start creating brand awareness and actually measuring sales against that brand awareness, something that traditionally couldn't be done with, above the line advertising or below the line advertising. Not that doesn't have its place in the brand awareness exercise. It's always been very difficult to tie that to the bottom line. And I think that's why marketing departments for a long time were always, in my opinion, held not very accountable, because there was no KPI to measure them on, right? Now that's fundamentally shifting, which is why, to your point, as you start reading into these articles past the headline of CMOs becoming extinct, they're actually changing the title of this role to Chief of Growth, as an example. So actually focusing more on growth. And you obviously come out of a digital domain and a digital product. But what may be interesting to see is, do you think this sales function sitting very closely alongside or even underneath a CMO function works for more traditional real products in the real world as well?
Jeepers, it's a great question. Look, I mean, my sense is that the full marketing and sales cycle, if it's not seen in one cohesive view, I struggle to see how you could keep any kind of portion of that cycle individually accountable. And I think that's something I've always been keenly aware of, is that accountability really matters. And although there's a lot of areas where there's collaboration and teamwork and so on, the fact is that you can't really view general brand awareness as an example, or let's say in another example, social media presence, and not concurrently view how the impact that it's having on sales. I would significantly struggle with that. So in bigger companies, jeepers, again, I think that you're missing out on some absolutely key intelligence if you're not looking at the entire marketing cycle, which to my mind very much includes sales.
Yeah, and I think that's basically the key point is that businesses have traditionally siloed those roles. I mean, I've even seen
Yeah.
it with clients we've worked with where the sales team is out on the ground selling. And I'm not talking about like high volume sales, I'm talking about B2B sales more. Um,
Yes.
and then the marketing team sits far apart and does campaigns. And they actually sort of have like a hatred for one another, these two departments. You know, sales guys
Yeah.
don't understand how marketing is actually helping them at all. And marketing are like, oh, the sales guys, all they care about is selling. But you know,
Completely.
I think to your point, it's about becoming a lot more collaborative between those departments, and we've seen it and taking lessons from digital products and sort of software service companies. The really good ones tend to make those not one role, but not silo them. They work very, very
Yes.
cohesively and collaboratively. So I think
Completely agree.
on that note, you mentioned earlier that you're onto your next chapter, which I'm sure everyone would want to hear about. So, in terms of your firstly, what is that, and secondly, do you see obviously the same pivotal role of marketing? Is it going to shift differently? How will you do things differently given your learnings, your early learnings from Get Smarter? I'm assuming, and maybe incorrectly, so that capital won't be as much of an issue. But yeah, it'll be interesting to
Yes.
hear that.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. So I'm in the process of launching a internationally accredited private online high school,
Amazing.
and I can't tell you how flippin' excited I am about this project. I've been keenly aware that there's a growing place for digital education in primary and
Mm-hmm.
secondary education, and I believe that that's on a global scale. Primary education is something I've struggled to get my head around a fully online primary educational experience. I just
Mm-hmm.
think there's too much social and emotional development that's happening that really benefits dramatically from in-person and physical presence learning experiences. But at the high school level, Brad, I'm seeing a enormous opportunity for an entirely online high school which focuses specifically on solving the world's biggest problems. Now, that's a very big statement,
Yeah,
so let me
huge
unpack that a
statement.
little
Yeah,
bit.
please.
We've run a lot of market testing and a lot of market research looking at what is it fundamentally that's motivating the leaders of tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And what my primary hypothesis going into the market testing was that kids are all about wanting to become technologically literate. They want to understand fourth industrial revolution. They want to understand how they can integrate their educational experience with industry and so on and so on. And as a kind of side test, I started looking at, well, maybe there's a possibility that actually they want to deal with dramatic changes affecting their futures, like climate change.
Yeah.
But that was really just a side hypothesis. So went out and did this market testing, and can't tell you how surprised I was to see that the next generation are very different from, or let me speak for myself, they're very different from the way that I was wired when I was 16 or 17 years old. These kids really care about the world that they're inheriting, and they're not prepared to just wait until some point in the future where perhaps they can come of age to supposedly then start to affect the change that they want to see in the world. And it's been astonishing to see from this market testing just how much kids care right now about affecting change related to causes that they care about. So this idea of a kind of purpose-driven high school experience was forged off the back of that market testing. And we're building out a business called Valencia Institute, which is really focusing on building the change makers of tomorrow. And it's a global private online high school. We're going to be launching in January 2020. Our first intake will be at the end of January 2020. And perhaps just to get a bit more specific to your questions around marketing, something that I'm acutely aware of, particularly with this age group, is that millennials and Generation Z and so on, they are far more interested in story doers than storytellers. And I think a lot of marketing for the longest time has been about telling stories, as opposed to just more honestly bearing the kind of DNA of your business for others to then judge.
100%.
and for me, really, as I think about what has to be absolutely mission critical to Valentia Institute, it's the fact that we walk the walk, and that if we are teaching kids about how to solve the world's biggest problems around things like climate change, social justice and inequality, health, etc., we need to be contributing in exactly the same way. It very much needs to be baked into our DNA. And that's the way I'm structuring my board, the way I'm structuring my EXCO team, the way we're thinking about our work and our role in society. It's far more than just providing a product and a service. It's about setting the right example that others can then follow. And that, to me, would be one of the biggest changes from the way I viewed marketing previously.
Okay, I mean that's really great insight, and congrats. It sounds like an amazing venture, and I'm sure it's going to be extremely successful. And I mean, just speaking on that, I read an article this morning about millennials and Gen Z buying into brand values and not actually buying into the product itself. And also, I don't know if you know Dave Duarte from a company called TreeShake. Great talker as well, great speaker. Him and I actually had a chat not too long ago, and he was saying, the whole marketing world is talking about storytelling. And he's like, I think it's all about story making. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there, where businesses actually also need to walk the talk and actually start making stories, not just telling stories. So really, really excited to see how that folds out, and congrats. And I guess just on a final note is something that we always like to ask the people we chat to and who've given us their time is, what are your favorite resources for learning? Any podcasts, any great books that you vouch by? I know I do have a bit of secret intel. Well, not secret intel. I think it's quite public. Your brother talks about it quite a bit around the Rockefeller Habits being quite a key book in your journey. Are there any other really great reads that you can recommend?
Well, so
any resources.
This gentleman who wrote Mastering the Rockefeller Habits is a guy called Vern Harnish. So that was the first book that he read. And so Sam and I flew over to Florida in I think it was about 2012 and met with this guy, Dan Devine, who had built a business much like ours, but much larger and far more successful. And he said to us, guys, just do one thing: read this book and implement everything that's in it. And that was Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. So I'm always hesitant to advise anything other than Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, except for the follow-on book, which is called Scaling Up by the same author, Vern Harnish. Brad, it's an astonishing and very practical how-to guide for high-growth businesses looking to manage cash carefully, looking to align strategy with execution across the board for hyper-effective growth. And I really can't. I mean, I'm tempted to talk about one or two other books, but really, let's keep it focused here. Scaling Up by Vern Harnish is one of the most powerful books that you can possibly read. So very specifically to marketing, to general business, that would be it. And then to marketing, I just love Seth Godin. Yeah, he's just brilliant. He is great. So I've subscribed to he's really good. Sometimes I feel like he's a fly on the wall watching me and giving me advice based on what I've normally done wrong the day before.
He probably
gives me this wise counsel the next day. So
no, he's amazing.
He's a profound marketing thinker, and I guess really relevant to the points that we've been discussing today. I think Seth is always a number of steps ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Okay, well, Rob, I really, really appreciate your time. I'm sure all of us are going to be watching Valentia really closely, and wish you all the best for your journey with that.
Wonderful. Thanks for the time today, Brad.
Thanks, Rob. Cheers.
Yes, bye.